The slowest may win the race. The hare and the tortoise, according to Aesop, ran a race because the hare boasted about his speed, but the tortoise won because of his steady plodding. But the theme of the animal race in which the slower wins has been presented among all manner of people to illustrate a variety of supposed truths. In a Sinhalese tale it is a lion and a tortoise, and the latter arranges with his brother to appear at the opposite side of a river, bearing a flower in token of identity. Far from there being a virtue in plodding, the slower creature here uses only his wits. In Madagascar, a chameleon actually makes a wild hog carry him in its mane. Every time the unwitting hog stopped, the chameleon leapt upon the grass a little way ahead and seemed to be in front. The story has even travelled as far as Fiji, where a crane and a crab are in competition. This time the crane stops every now and then at a crab hole and hears the buzzing which he takes for that of his challenger. The message is that anything may be accomplished by trusting to the cooperation of relatives. Here is the Siamese presentation, collected in Thailand by Adolf Bastian. The Garuda, magical bird of Vishnu, was hungry as, one day, he flew over a lake and saw a tortoise in it. The tortoise diverted his interest by suggesting that, before being eaten up, they should run a race to see who was the faster. The magnificent bird agreed, and rose high into the air, ready to fly. While he was doing that, the tortoise collected all his friends and relatives, all the living tortoises, and placed them in rows of 100, of 1,000, of 10,000, of 100,000, of 1,000,000, and of 10,000,000, so that they covered every inch of the ground. When he was ready, the tortoise called out, "I am ready to start. Your Highness may go through the air, while I shall move by water, and we shall see who is the winner. The wager is that if I lose, you will be able to eat me up." Now the Garuda flew with all his might, and then stopped and called to the tortoise. And whichever direction he flew, a tortoise always answered him from somewhere ahead. He even flew as far as the great mountain, the Himaphan. At last he had to tell the tortoise that he had been outraced, and he returned, baffled, to his home, the Rathal tree, to rest. The Three Impostors. 100 years before the European invention of printing, Prince Manuel, nephew of the Spanish King Alfonso the Wise, wrote the 50 Pleasant Stories, one of the real gems of early Spanish literature. He died in 1347, and the book was not printed until over 200 years afterwards, when it appeared in Seville. It lay forgotten until the Madrid edition of 1642, and these two impressions are today among the rarest books in the world. After nearly another 2 centuries, it came out in Stuttgart in 1839, and then in Paris the following year. This story, A King and Three Impostors, is said by Prince Manuel to come from a Moorish source. It is, of course, undoubtedly the basis of Hans Christian Andersen's The Emperor's New Clothes. 3 impostors came to a king and told him that they were weavers and could produce a cloth of such a strange kind that a legitimate son of his father could see it, but nobody else could, even if they were believed to be legitimate. Now the king was much pleased at this, thinking that by this means he would be able to distinguish those who were the sons of their supposed fathers from those who were not. So he ordered a palace to be set aside for the making of this cloth. The 3 men, to convince him that they were genuine and sincere, agreed to be shut up in this building until the cloth had been made, and this satisfied the king. The weavers were given a large quantity of gold, silver, and silk, and many other things to work with. They set up their looms in the palace and pretended that they were working all day at the cloth. After some days, one of the men went to the king and told him that the cloth had been started, and he told him all kinds of things about it, and asked him to visit them, but asked that he should come alone. The king was very pleased, but thought that he would get another opinion of the magical fabric first, so he sent the Lord Chamberlain to have a look. The Lord Chamberlain duly went and could see nothing, but he dared not admit that the wonderful cloth was invisible to him, so he returned to the king and said that he had really seen it. The king then sent someone else and received the same report. Now the king decided to see for himself. When he entered the palace, the king found the men there, and they described the cloth in detail, including its design. They all agreed on the details and even the origin and method of making of the cloth. The king could not see anything at all, for there was no cloth there, but he began to feel very uneasy, fearing that he might not be the true son of the king who was supposed to be his father. "If I cannot see it," he thought, "I might have to lose my kingdom, which depends upon inheritance." So he started to praise the cloth and repeated the details which the impostors had outlined. When he returned to his own palace, the king continued to speak of the cloth as if it were real, though at the same time he inwardly suspected that something was wrong. After a few days, the monarch asked his wakil, the officer of justice, to go and see the cloth. Exactly the same thing happened to the wakil. He went into the palace of the weavers, who described the pattern, though he could see nothing of any cloth of any kind. Naturally, the unhappy wakil immediately imagined that he could not be the true son of his father, and that must be the cause of the material remaining invisible to him. Fearing that the discovery of this fact about him would mean the loss of his important position, the wakil set about praising the non-existent cloth in even more extravagant terms than the king and the Lord Chamberlain. He went back to the king and told him that he had indeed viewed the cloth, and that it was the most extraordinary tissue in the world. The king was deeply distressed. There could now, he thought, be no doubt that he himself was not the offspring of his father. But he hastened to agree with the rapturous descriptions of the wondrous fabric brought him by the law officer. And he did not forget to add unstinted praise for the inspired workmen who were weaving it. The king continued to send people to see the cloth, and they, not unnaturally, all came back to him with the same impressions as everyone else. This tale continued in just the same way until the king was told that the cloth was finished. He ordered that a great feast be prepared, where everyone should be dressed in clothes made from the miraculous material. The weavers thereupon presented themselves with some of the cloth rolled in fine linen, and asked His Majesty how much would be required, and the king told them the quantity and what kind of clothes were to be made. The feast day arrived, and the clothes were reported to be complete. The weavers came to the king with a magic robe which he himself was to wear. The king, of course, did not dare to say that he could not see it, or even feel it. Now the impostors pretended to dress the king in his new clothes, and he mounted his horse and rode into the city. Luckily, it was summertime. People who saw the king pass were very surprised at what they beheld. But word had got around that only the illegitimate were unable to see the cloth, so people kept their distress and amazement to themselves. All of them did, in fact, except a black man who was among those lining the streets. He immediately approached the king and said, "Sire, it is of no interest to me whose son I am, so I can tell you that in fact you are riding about without any clothes on." At first the king struck the black a blow, saying that he must be illegitimate and that was why the cloth was invisible to him. But other people, once the spell of silence and fear had been broken, saw that it was true and said the same. Even the king and his court now realized that they had been tricked. The false weavers, of course, when they were sought, were found to have fled with the things which the king had given them to make the cloth from. Occasion. It is often claimed that folk tales represent survivals of ancient religious beliefs. This story either gives the lie to that suggestion, since it has no identifiable Christian message, or else it supports it if it represents some other, more ancient belief system. How the individual can prevail over and dominate a spiritual power, upon which he is shown in the tale itself to depend for the benefits of the hereafter, is justified, can perhaps only be explained by the wish fulfillment factor. This account, although not the only example of its kind, is taken from Sicilian folklore. There was once an orphan named Occasion, who was taken in from pity by a certain couple. When he was grown up, the foster parents said, "Well, Occasion, is it not time that you supported yourself, as you are now a man?" Occasion set off on his travels, and journeyed until he became completely exhausted and ragged. He arrived at an inn, where he asked to become a servant, in exchange for nothing more than a piece of bread for wages. The innkeeper and his wife Rosella took him in, and he worked so well that they adopted him. When they died, he inherited the inn. When Occasion took over the establishment, he announced, "Whoever should come to Occasion's inn can have food for nothing." Jesus and St. Thomas heard about this, and the latter said that he did not believe it, and would only credit it if he touched it with his hands. They went and ate and drank and were well entertained by Occasion. Before leaving, St. Thomas asked whether Occasion would like a favour from the master. Occasion said that he could not get any figs from his tree, as boys climbed up it and stole them. "I would like this favour," he asked, "that whenever anyone climbs this tree, he just stays there until I allow him down." The request was granted. Occasion found that all the boys who climbed the tree were stuck fast, and he punished them when they tried to steal his fruit, and they stole no more. Occasion's money was coming to an end as time passed, so he called a carpenter and had him make a bottle from the wood of the fig tree. The power of this bottle was that whoever was shut in it could not get out. Then death came to Occasion, for he was now very old. Occasion said, "I am ready to go, but do me a favour. There is a fly in this wine bottle. Get it out for me before I drink, and then I will come with you." Death went into the bottle, and Occasion put it in his wallet, saying, "Stay a while with me." Now, since Death was imprisoned, nobody died. There were old men with long white beards everywhere. The disciples came to hear of this, and went to the master again and again. Eventually he visited Occasion and complained. Occasion said, "If you give me a place in paradise, I will let Death out." The Lord thought, "If I do not agree, he will give us no peace." So he granted the request. So people were allowed to die, and Occasion had some years of his own life left. This is why there is a saying, "There is no death without occasion." A request. If you enjoyed this book, please review it on Amazon and Goodreads. Reviews are an author's best friend. To stay in touch with news on forthcoming editions of Idries Shah works, please sign up for the mailing list at bit.ly/isflist. And to follow him on social media, please go to any of the following links: twitter.com/Idries Shah, facebook.com/Idries Shah, youtube.com/Idries Shah 999, pinterest.com/Idries Shah, on Goodreads at bit.ly/isgoodreads, idriesshah.tumblr.com, idriesshah.tumblr.com, and instagram.com/Idries Shah. Or you can find the main website at idriesshahfoundation.org. That was World Tales, collected by Idries Shah. First published 1979, published in this edition 2017. This work is copyright the estate of Idries Shah, all rights reserved. This audiobook has been narrated by David Ault.